They say pleasure is the reward, but what if it's the disguise? What if the chocolate, the scroll, the lust, the laugh, those brief flashes of relief are merely shadows, cleverly dressed illusions, masking something far more primitive and far more painful beneath the surface? Let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt full without needing something more? Not just full of food or laughter, not just temporarily satisfied or distracted, but truly deeply full, fulfilled. In a way that didn't leave a craving echoing in the silence afterward. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We live in an age of pleasure. We are starving. Carl Jung once warned that the things we chase for comfort are often the very same things that keep us from healing. He wasn't talking about luxury or excess. He was talking about something subtler and more dangerous, the distractions that pose as pleasure.
Anesthesia.
The anesthesia we choose instead of presence. Today, you're going to see pleasure in a way you may never have seen it before. So let's begin. Imagine this. You open your eyes in the morning, instinctively, almost involuntarily, you reach for your phone. Not because anything urgent is waiting, not because there's something joyful awaiting you. You just do it. Reflex is stronger than hunger. You scroll. A meme makes you smile for 3 seconds. A reel triggers a laugh you forget moments later. Then another. Another. Before you know it, the day is evaporating into pixels and swipes, but the ache beneath it all. It remains, you finally put the phone down. Maybe snack on something. Sweet, salty, or both. But the hunger wasn't in your stomach, it was somewhere else entirely. You weren't seeking nourishment, not for the body, not even for the brain. You were seeking silence. You were chasing a way out. A tiny escape from a storm inside you that you've never had the words to describe. Let me show you how Jung saw it. He believed that every person carries a shadow, a hidden, rejected part of the self. And we bury it, not with honesty, but with noise. Distraction becomes the shovel. Pleasure becomes the dirt. So when you eat, but you're not hungry? When you scroll, but you're not curious? When you desire, but it isn't rooted in love? You're not choosing joy. You're choosing anesthesia. And here's the painful truth. Most pleasure isn't pleasure. It's relief from self-awareness. But relief has a cost, a steep one. Because every hit of false pleasure, every shortcut, every fleeting fix only, deepens the hunger for what's real. And when the real doesn't come, we start to believe something is broken inside us. But we're not broken, we're just unaware. Unaware that we've been trained systematically, culturally, to mistake escape for enjoyment. Unaware that the things we crave might not be solutions at all, but symptoms of something deeper calling out. Let me take you further back. You're 6 years old. You cry loud, honest emotion, and no one comes, no comfort. So you adapt. You learn. When I feel bad, I get nothing. But when you smile, when you perform, distract, entertain, people respond. People approve. And approval becomes the new comfort. That lesson sticks, so you repeat it again and again, till adulthood. When your pain becomes invisible and your pleasures become louder, louder than your loneliness, louder than your fear, louder than the quiet voice of the child within, who still just wants to be held. But here's what most people never realize. Pleasure has memory. Every time you use it to numb your pain, to quiet your inner world, you train your nervous system. To fear stillness, you hardwire discomfort into silence. Stillness becomes unbearable. That's why sitting alone feels suffocating. Why a quiet room feels like a threat. Why you need music in the shower. Why silence isn't rest, it feels like punishment. And yet, it's in that silence where healing waits. And Jung knew this. He saw how pleasure, when misused, becomes an enemy of the soul. Not because pleasure itself is inherently evil, far from it, but because we've learned to misuse it. The real enemy isn't pleasure. The true enemy is the avoidance that pleasure allows. Avoidance of what? Of pain, of silence, of self. Now, before we go any deeper, I want you to pause for a second and do something simple. If any part of this resonates with you, if you've ever felt that strange hollow guilt after indulging in something that was supposed to bring joy, hit subscribe. Not just to support this message reaching others, but to remind yourself, You are not alone in this experience. And if you're brave enough, drop a comment below. Tell us what moment hit you the hardest so far, because it's not weakness too. Admit it, strength to witness it. Now, let me show you the trap. Picture this. A lone traveler wandering across a desert, desperate for water, chasing one mirage after another. Each one shimmers with promise. But every time they get close, it disappears. Still, they keep chasing, not because they're foolish, but because they believe the next one might be real. That's what pleasure becomes when it arrives without purpose, an endless pursuit of illusions. And here's the quiet irony. Real pleasure, the kind that feeds rather than drains the soul's, often subtle. It doesn't scream for your attention. It doesn't numb your mind or drown your thoughts. It expands you. It lives in a deep, honest conversation. In finally completing something you feared for weeks. In waking up and realizing that you no longer crave what once controlled you. But we don't crave this kind of pleasure. Why? Because it demands effort. It asks for presence. It's not easy. And yet it's the only kind that truly satisfies. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And in a way, pleasure is the most beautiful absurdity we've ever invented. Let's go further. Let's rewind. You're a child again. You fall and scrape your knee. It hurts. You cry. But instead of comfort, you're met with distraction. Here, have a cookie. Don't cry. Or stop crying. Look, a cartoon's on. That small moment seems harmless, but it stays with you not in your memory, but in your nervous system. Your brain silently absorbs a rule. Pain equals punishment. Feeling equals weakness. Solution equals pleasure. So you grow up, become fluent in the language of distraction, and without ever choosing it consciously. Pleasure becomes your translator. It speaks for you when you're too afraid to say, "I'm not okay." It dances in your place when you're too tired to admit, "I'm empty." It smiles for you when deep down all you want to do is scream. But here's what no one tells you. Every single time you swap emotion for stimulation, every time you avoid feeling by reaching for a screen, a snack, or a scroll, you lose a little more intimacy with your true self. Jung warned us, when the inner world is ignored, the outer world becomes louder. And what is louder than today's world of pleasure? The scroll, the buzz, the ping, the endless binge. They shout. So we don't have to listen, but listen. To what? To this? The ache that hides underneath it all? The need for meaning. The quiet, persistent desire to belong. The wound of being unseen, unheard, untouched. You see, pleasure is not bad. When chosen with intention, it is sacred. But when used to replace presence, it becomes poison. Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt that quiet, nagging guilt after a moment of pleasure? After watching just one more episode, even though you were already tired? After texting someone you know you shouldn't have, but you needed attention? After buying something unnecessary or eating long after your hunger was gone? That guilt you feel, it's not because you committed some great sin. It's not because pleasure itself is wrong. It's because deep down, a part of you knows you weren't truly nourished. You weren't fulfilled. You just avoided the hunger. That ache wasn't satisfied. It was distracted. This is where so many people misunderstand Carl Jung. They hear shadow work and think it means becoming edgy, dark, or mysterious. But that's a surface-level interpretation. Shadow work isn't about becoming darker. It's about becoming honest. It's about looking at those exact moments. It's the ones where you betray yourself just to feel relief and gently saying, "I see you, and I choose truth over escape." Let me give you a real story. There was someone who couldn't stop chasing relationships. They described themselves as a hopeless romantic. On the outside, it seemed passionate, even poetic. But every relationship followed the same pattern: intensity, obsession, emotional crash, repeat. And when asked why this kept happening, they said, "I just love love." But that wasn't the full truth. What they really loved was distraction. Because when they were alone, the silence wasn't peaceful, it was deafening. They'd never learned how to sit with their wounds. They never knew how to stay with the ache without running. So pleasure became their plaster, their quick fix, temporary cover, until, inevitably, the plaster cracked. And that story? It's not rare. It's not dramatic. It's the hidden story of millions. People who confuse longing with love, who mistake scrolling for joy, who think numbing is the same thing as healing. But here's the real danger. It's not that these pleasures exist. We all deserve joy. The danger is when we never stop to ask, why do I need this right now? We forget to question what's beneath the craving. So here's the myth we absolutely must destroy. Pleasure is not healing. Pleasure is not peace. Pleasure is not power. Pleasure is a tool, and tools, when misused, can become weapons. Now let's flip the script. Think of the last time you delayed gratification. You paused before sending that text. You sat with the craving. You ignored the impulse to click, to buy, to binge. And later, you didn't just feel okay. You felt proud. You felt calm. Why? Because discipline isn't just control, it's self-trust, and trust, especially trust in yourself, is the real high. Because when you begin to trust yourself, pleasure no longer owns you. You don't reach for it out of fear. You choose it. Intentionally, fully, freely. That's when pleasure becomes beautiful again. Not a drug, not a distraction, but a celebration. Now picture this. You walk into a room. There's no noise, no notifications, no background music. Just you. And instead of panic, you feel peace. You feel home. Not because you've finally acquired everything, but because you've realized you are everything. That's what Jung meant. By individuation, the journey to becoming whole. Not through denial, not by grinding your way to perfection, but through integration. The ability to feel pleasure without using it as a shield. The ability to enjoy silence without fearing what it will reveal. The ability to sit with yourself, genuinely like who you're sitting with. That is the goal. But you don't reach it by chasing high after high. You get there by slowly lowering the volume of your distractions and listening to what they've been covering up all along. So what does that actually look like? It looks like pausing before you reach for the phone and asking yourself, what am I avoiding? It looks like sitting with that loneliness, not running to sugar or sex or scrolling, but simply feeling it. It looks like choosing the slower pleasure, the one that doesn't shout for your attention, the one that requires effort, presence, and patience. The kind of pleasure that's not flashy, but fulfilling. Because here's the hidden truth. Most people miss real pleasure isn't instant. It's earned. It's not found in a swipe or a scroll. It lives in the spaces where time and intention meet. The best laugh? It's not from a meme, but with someone you truly trust. Someone who's seen you at your worst and stayed. The best meal? It's not fast food at midnight, but the one after a long day of meaningful work, where your body is tired, but your soul is full. And the most powerful connection doesn't come from a match or a like, comes after a real conversation, one where you weren't just heard, but seen. Let me offer you a moment to pause. If something in this message stirred something deep in you, that's what awakening feels like. It isn't some loud cosmic explosion, no spotlight, no music swelling in the background. It's subtle, it's quiet, it's not dramatic, it's decisive. And the decision in front of you is painfully simple. Will you keep numbing the ache with fast, easy pleasures? Or will you finally meet yourself fully, bravely, without anesthesia? Carl Jung once said that most neuroses don't come from the trauma itself, but from our refusal to face what that trauma left behind. And pleasure, when used unconsciously, becomes the perfect distraction. It's the perfect way to avoid that inner reckoning. But now that you've seen it, what will you do? Let's go deeper. So here we are. You've heard the warnings. You've felt those quiet tremors of recognition in your chest. You've started to notice the mask of pleasure slipping, revealing the hollow beneath. Now comes the moment few dare to face, the truth that doesn't just sting, shatters. Because if you really want to reclaim your life from the grip of false pleasure, you must admit something most people run from their entire lives. You have betrayed yourself. Not once. Not loudly, but quietly, subtly, relentlessly, day after day. Each time you reached for the fast fix, telling yourself just 5 more minutes. Each time you silenced the discomfort with a screen, a snack, a scroll. Each time you avoided the stillness because it whispered something you weren't ready to hear. Each time you told yourself, "This makes me feel good," when deep down, you knew it just helped you forget. But hear this. Clearly, this isn't about shame. This is awakening. You are not weak for doing what once kept you safe. You're not broken for craving something that dulled the sting. You were surviving. But now, finally, you are ready to live. Because once you see the loop, once you truly understand that most pleasure wasn't joy, but sedation, you stop chasing the same things. The party doesn't feel the same. The scroll doesn't scratch the itch. The hookup doesn't fill the hole. The sugar doesn't soothe the scream. Because the real pain you were running from, it wasn't boredom. It was the absence of self. Let me paint you a picture that sticks. Imagine your life as a house. And inside that house lives your wounded child, your buried truth, your unhealed memory. But instead of walking through the front door to face them, you build an entertainment system on the lawn. Music blaring, candy everywhere, bright lights, comfort in every corner. You throw a party in the front yard. Meanwhile, your inner child waits inside, alone, unseen, unheard. That's what unchecked pleasure does. It builds a carnival outside your house, so you never have to go inside. But healing, real healing, is walking through that silence, opening the door, stepping into your own house, sitting with that inner child, and saying, "I'm here now." You can speak. That is the work Jung spoke of. He didn't want people to become addicted to stillness. He wanted them to become unafraid of it. To understand that silence isn't a void. It's not the death of noise or the absence of action. Silence is presence. It's everything we've been running from. The heartbreak we never processed. The truths we never spoke. The grief we stuffed down. Because when the music fades, the screens go dark, and the noise settles, what's left is you. And that's what Carl Jung wanted people to face. Not with fear, but with reverence. Now, here's the turning point. Climax. The final myth that needs to be shattered. You've been taught to chase pleasure as if it were your purpose. To believe that happiness is the same as feeling good. To think that freedom means indulging every impulse. Seating what you crave, buying what you want, clicking without consequence. But here's the truth. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's no longer needing to. Real pleasure isn't in the chocolate. It isn't in the phone buzz. It isn't in the attention you get, the praise you collect, or the rush of dopamine that comes from escape. True pleasure is this: the moment you realize you're no longer afraid of yourself. You no longer need to escape your thoughts, run from your feelings, or hide in stimulation. You can sit in stillness and smile, not because the moment is empty, but because it's so full of presence, full of truth, full of quiet power, and something begins to shift. You become the kind of person who doesn't chase highs, because peace lives in you now, and people will notice. They'll look at you differently. They'll sense something they can't quite name. They'll say you've changed. You'll talk a little slower. You'll pause before you speak. You'll laugh not more often, but more deeply. And they'll ask things like, "Why don't you drink as much? Why aren't you online anymore? Why don't you text back right away?" And you'll just smile. Not in superiority, but in understanding. Because they haven't yet realized what you now know. You're no longer avoiding anything. You are simply present and presence. That's what unsettles people. Because when someone no longer needs pleasure to feel okay, they become powerful. They become uncontrollable, unshaken, undistracted, unmanipulable. Pleasure no longer hooks them. Marketing doesn't seduce them. Addiction loses its grip because presence has returned, and presence is the purest act of rebellion. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not a dopamine addict. You are not a bundle of cravings. You are not just a consumer of pleasure. You are a creator of meaning, and meaning. It's rarely pleasurable. It's inconvenient. It's demanding. It asks more of you than you think you can give. It's often uncomfortable, but it's real. It nourishes you in ways pleasure never could. So the next time the craving whispers, pause not to fight it, not to shame it, but to ask, what do I truly need right now? Just that question, simple, honest, can change everything. Because it interrupts the loop. It hands you back the pen. It reminds you, you are not your hunger. You are the one who chooses how to feed it. So let me leave you with this. You'll never look at pleasure the same way again. Not because it's wrong, not because it's evil, but because now you see it clearly. You'll still laugh, still love life's sweetness, but you'll do it with awareness. And that awareness will shield you from trading your deep peace for temporary comfort. It will make your joy sacred, your relationships cleaner, your habits stronger, and your silence golden. Because the only pleasure worth having is the one you no longer need to chase.